Of course, with the latest on the fallout from yesterday's non-budget speech, the postponement in the budget speech for 2025, and the contentious issue of the proposed increase of 2 percentage points in value-added tax, sparking concerns around the implications on that on inflation. As you know, the dispute between the DA and the ANC and several other parties on this issue continues to reflect uncertainty to the markets. Our business anchor, Tumusang Ndlovu, is keeping an eye on what's happening at the JSE. Tumusang, good afternoon to you. What's today's performance on the market told us about how markets are feeling about yesterday?
Good afternoon once again, Stephen. As we monitor developments on the markets, as you just alluded a short while ago, that contentious proposal of a 2% hike in VAT has emerged as the biggest issue to be deliberated, and that's where the uncertainty is coming from. I am getting reaction from a number of commentators, role players and interested parties, and who joins me now is Bonga, Makhanya from the SA Youth Economic Council. Bonga, thank you so much for your time. I think, first of all, the initial reaction to an unprecedented event, Budget 2025 postponed.
Greetings to me and greetings to all the listeners of Newzroom Afrika. Of course, this was the first major test for the governments of national unity under a coalition era, and unprecedented, like you said. But we've got confidence that the executive can come together and there'll be some sort of mature leadership that by the time the next sitting happens on the 12th of March, a budget will be passed and will be presented in Parliament so that the work of government can continue. Of course, there's not too much cause for concern because we do know that there are regulations that empower Treasury to, even if they fail to pass on the 12th of March, 40% of the previous year's budget can actually still be deployed to different government departments so that the work of government can continue. So, of course, it's slightly concerning, but nothing too hair-raising at this point in time. Yeah.
Now, let me get your stance as the SA Youth Economic Council on the proposal of a 2% hike to VAT. Criticism has come on the side of it being unaffordable for many South Africans. Your thoughts?
Of course, we sympathize with many South Africans in the calls that have been made to reject the 2% VAT hike, particularly for the reasons that you've stated, that when you increase VAT, it affects the poorest of the poor, and it affects literally the levels of income of ordinary South Africans who now have to pay more for all the goods and services they consume. And we believe that this is not the more, and of course we accept that Treasury is very limited in terms of the fiscal tools it can deploy, meaning that we do have a very small tax base in terms of people that contribute to our tax revenue collections. I think it's about 9 million South Africans contributing to about 60 million people. So the amount of money you can actually tax is very limited, and the levers that government can use is quite limiting. However, we believe that there are other mechanisms, for example, your capital gains tax, your dividends tax, and your estate duty tax. That tax regime, if they were to increase that and look for the money there, then we believe that would actually be targeting people who've been benefiting from the economy, individuals who are quite wealthy, who won't feel the pinch as much as people like myself and many other ordinary South Africans. However, once you start playing with VAT, you start playing with literally pockets, money in the pockets of ordinary South Africans. So on top of that, we accept that VAT, if you increase it, it probably brings in way more money than other forms of taxation. I think the shortfall is around 60 billion rand. So if in the event where your capital gains tax, your dividends tax, and your estate duty tax is not enough to cover the shortfall, because Treasury is currently looking for money right now, then we do believe that they can resort to also domestic borrowing. We do know that Treasury has not exhausted its capacity to borrow from the Reserve Bank. We are under borrowing from the Reserve Bank quite clearly. And 90% of our debt in South Africa is denominated in rands, meaning that should kingdom come, government can actually pay back the money. But of course, so our debt levels currently are not too worrying, such that it's not a measure that government can use, like other emerging markets or other even established economies where the debt to GDP ratio is above 100%. Ours is still below that range, and most of our debt is in our own currency. So we believe that if the money that they want to raise from other forms of taxation, which is aimed at the wealthy, they could also look at kind of like a quasi way of fundraising, which is also looking at borrowing money to finance the spend, as opposed to going into the pockets of the poor, which we don't necessarily agree with. And of course, there's also the element of corporate tax, which is not too attractive right now because we're trying to attract international investment to the country and grow our industrial base. So that's not something that we would think that maybe they should play around with at this point in time. Instead, let's look for more creative tax collection systems which can allow us to tax the very wealthy in this country.
Just quickly, Bonga, we know that students in South Africa, given the challenges of NSFAS, need this money from National Treasury. What are your thoughts around what you want to hear once the budget is delivered? Quickly.
Of course, there has to be a deliberate plan aimed at assisting students called the missing middle. I think NSFAS has done very well over the past few years of funding poor and working class students from poor and working class backgrounds. However, if you look at the age group or the bracket between 350 and above, that's around 50,000 rand per household, which is most middle income households. For example, if your mother's a nurse and your father's a policeman, you don't qualify for NSFAS, but you also don't qualify to go to FITS or UCT or any of the traditional universities because the fees are too expensive. So there was a scheme in the previous administration that was started by NSFAS to say how can we empower those people. We hope that Treasury can actually look at ways into deliberately funding them as well, but also making sure that they fix NSFAS. We welcome the appointments of the new board and the young people that are there, including Dr. Sianda Mgati, Karabo Mohale. So it shows that the new administration is very deliberate and clear about the issues affecting students because they've appointed a board in a few months after their term has started. We just hope now that they can be supported by Treasury and other funding institutions which will empower them to work for all students of South Africa so that they can deal with the crisis that's happening right now at UCT, at WITS, and across the country where we are going to see protests in this country. And I think the leadership must be alive to that reality. And NSFAS must come on board to say that all deserving students must be given money, must be paid on time, and resolve all of those administrative challenges. Because for you not receiving 1.5, for example, might not be a train smash, but for a student who relies on that stipend of NSFAS, the whole world essentially stops for them because a lot of inconvenience that happens there. So capitalize NSFAS and make sure that we fund the higher education sector so we can get a more skilled and young labor force into the economy.
Thank you so much. Bonga Makhanya from the SA Youth Economic Council. They're giving us reaction to that postponement of the budget. Stephen, we will bring you rolling coverage of the developments around the markets following that shock announcement of Budget 2025 having been pushed further to the 12th of March.
Tumasanga Lobo, thank you very much indeed for that. More, of course, reaction through the afternoon. Let's